Welcome to the Exhaust Notes podcast.
What is good, everyone? Welcome to the Exhaust Notes Formula One podcast. Your favorite Formula One podcast, if I can get that right. My name's Nick Ingval. I'm with my guys, Todd and Rowett. I don't even know if we're going to talk about racing because this season is off to what we were just discussing pre-hitting record. I feel like you guys nailed it. We've moved into the real Housewives of F1 era of the sport. So the sport no longer matters because the drama will be what sells new fans.
It's sports entertainment. It's sports entertainment. It's the
Something
real
like that.
chauffeur drivers of Monaco, as I think Todd once called it. It's
Can we talk about something happy first before we jump into...
Yeah. Oh, you got it?
Yeah, mine just showed up.
They just released the best race car of all time. For those of you just listening, it is the McLaren MP44 driven by Ayrton Senna. And it comes with a little Senna figure. I already started building it. I couldn't contain my excitement, but there's little Senna.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely go out and get one while they're still available. I bought two. I don't know why. I bought two.
One for the son? One for the daughter?
Maybe. We'll see.
No, but before that... Go ahead, Nick.
I was just going to say, I'll put a link in the description for it, wherever you're watching or listening to this, but I have not opened my box yet. It showed up today, though, so...
Nice.
I still haven't opened my McLaren from 2 years ago, so I feel like I need to open that before I buy it, but this will probably be copped. But I was going to say this before Todd brought us that moment of much-needed joy and zen. The WWF1, as I like to call it now.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good? Okay, we'll take that.
That's really good. We need to... There's the title of the episode, actually.
No, it's just... Go ahead. I was just going to say this. It's... Here, we could do a race recap, but Max wins, LOL, but the real drama is off the track. Go.
Where do you start?
I'll give you a segue. Max Verstappen won the race, and it was as boring as the excitement off of the race in terms of all the allegations, and we will stress the word allegations because none of this has been proven to be true, but if you need a special spicy brand of vanilla, why don't you guys go ahead and go on the interwebs and type in Christian Horner American Pie, because that is the start of the rabbit hole. In one hand, you have the Blue Bull pin, and in the other one, you have the Red Bull pin. And listener, take the Red Bull pin. Or pill. God, I just don't know where to go. It's a fever dream. Somebody save me from myself.
It really is. But we get to start with the horn dog. I mean, we already talked about it a little bit, but for those unaware, a day after Red Bull announced that their internal investigation, which was a third-party investigation, I will add, it was the British King's Council, which I didn't know was a thing. But they have, you can basically, it sounds like hire out the government in England to say, hey, you need to investigate this for us.
I mean, I got to give them credit, considering here in America... when we have a third-party investigation or we have the government get involved, companies like Boeing just hire their employees again to do the second role of checking the work that they just did, and then people fly out of airplanes,
Yeah,
when the
at
doors
least they're
fly open.
consistent. They're consistent in that.
It's true.
Consistency keeps you winning.
Yeah.
But the day after that Red Bull announced that the investigation was closed and that essentially Christian Horner had been cleared of any wrongdoing, someone very intentionally...
Neuromod devices.
My bad.
Well, neuromod devices.
Maybe that was the source of the leak.
It could have been AI. Who knows? Leaked a Google Drive containing 75 or 79 pictures, screenshots of various things, a couple of horn dog selfies, some WhatsApp chat screenshots, maybe an illicit pic or two, and a very probably now infamous video of American Pie.
And before listeners get ahead of themselves, it's not even the funny American Pie. It's not Christian Horner messing with the pie. It's literally him singing the song. Because that would be one thing. If he made this poor girl reenact the scene that Nadia and Jim had to do in American Pie, that could be scandalous. But there is nothing scandalous about this video. In fact, part of me is just wondering, how did that make it in? Was it just too close to the other files, and then when they did the select all, they're like, crap, oh, I'll just send it. Let it be the red herring of this whole thing, the Red Bull herring.
Honestly, some like decent human was on the other end of that investigation and was like, nobody should have to deal with somebody sending this. Like, I don't care how drunk he is, this is not appropriate, right?
Well, so I did read some of it. A lot of it got taken down. I think rightfully so. From the text exchanges with whoever this lady is, it sounded like they were both into it, I guess. Kind of a workplace romance. And this isn't defending Christian Horner. I think he's a POS. Like we've talked about that. But it sounded like it was like a maybe not 50-50 thing, but like definitely being reciprocated somewhat from the other end, right? So, okay, that is what it is. But I'll just get right to my point. This is the weirdest, most intentional like hit job I feel like I've ever seen in anything ever. Like they intentionally leaked. So somebody knew all of the F1 journalists' emails, all of the FIA people's emails, all of the team bosses' emails, and it was leaked specifically to them. It wasn't like they sent it to like the Sun or like some other big British news establishment, right? They leaked it specifically to the people that would have the most influence or make the biggest stink about it, which seems super suspicious. And then on top of that, they had like I want you to go read Joe Saward's blog post from this weekend. It's like one of the best things I've written or read in a while. But he talks about how insane like this whole thing is, regardless of your opinion on one side or the other, that this is like being put out there and everybody's just like, all right, that happened. Like nobody necessarily ran with the story, but it's the weirdest hit job I've ever seen. And I was blown away by
the crazy part is there's so much stuff that pops up and then disappears on like legitimate websites. You know, like legitimate news companies will do a piece today and then tomorrow morning it'll get pulled down. And you're like, what? Because I've clicked so many links that die trying to find, more story on it. I think the other thing is like, it probably isn't some like highly intelligent person who just happen to have everybody's email. It's probably just the poorly run Formula One operations that actually have the catch-all email address of everyone at Formula1.com, and it sends it to literally everyone at Formula One.
But Nick, I will say this. The one piece of evidence in every article I've read is, to Todd's point, it calls out the fact that they sent this to all the principals, all the FIA members, and every article to an article said highly credited members of the media. It's almost like they were trying to make sure that they exercise this through the proper channels, so that way there's an aura of legitimacy with regards to this report. That being said, MBS, I'm on to you. How dare you?
But I don't even think it's MBS. And the crazier part
joking.
is,
I'm not. It's not MBS. It's
no. It could be. He could be part of the, the psyop, as we love to talk about.
I mean, I watched
the deep state.
I watched Kim Illman's video on it, right? Who's like one of the trusted members of the media. And he was just basically like, I'm not going to talk about it, but there's a lot of drama going on. Here are these other things you should be paying attention to, which is kind of like what you would expect from, I don't know, like, I have no idea like how bad things were, if it matters to either of the parties involved, or if this is just somebody trying to like roll Christian Horner under the bus. But I feel like regardless of the situation, this just is more kind of proof of the billionaire boys club that is Formula One, right? It's like all this stuff has happened, maybe not this exact same thing, but crazy allegations happen all the time. A bunch of stuff gets leaked, a bunch of rumors spread, a bunch of terrible things happen, and we just keep racing. And I think that's like probably the worst part about this sport, if I'm being blunt about it. Like I mean, what was the race that we had a couple years ago where it's like
Yep. The
there's
terrorist
bombs,
attack.
a
Yeah,
terrorist
like
attack out, in viewing distance of the track during practice or whatever. Like everything just gets brushed under the rug with Formula One, and it's tough because, like, as a fan, you want to see him race. Even when Max is kicking everyone's ass, I still want to watch the race. But the more of this stuff happens, the more I'm like, honestly, like I don't watch any of the Real Housewives shit, so why would I watch this?
The one thing I left out earlier, and last thing I'll say about Joe Saward's article, and why I call this like a weird psychotic hit job, is because something he called out that I didn't notice the first time I looked at this leak stuff is that a lot of the screenshots were like while supposedly Christian Horner was like in the WhatsApp chat or while typing, so it felt very like premeditated. So now you're even questioning, like, is any of this even real? Was this like a plant? Like, how deep does this rabbit hole go? Blue pill, red pill situation. I'm so blown away by it, but like that kind of backs up what Nick just said, is like, I don't want to, like, I want to nerd out about a new front wing or a new, aero development or somebody crashing into somebody, or the Alpine's technical director quitting before the race. We'll get to that. Like that's the stuff that's interesting to me, the drama that's in the paddock that's interesting to me, not like this kind of stuff.
this feels too fabricated. Like your point as well. It's like this almost seems like it's central casting, or rather, from straight from the writer's office for Drive to Survive, because I think out of the three of us, I'm the one that I feel cares the least about the technical stuff. I care more about the human interaction, the drama, but this is a bridge too far. This is someone's livelihood. This is someone's marriage. This is also an unidentifiable victim, and I hope that she maintains her anonymity in all of this, because the last thing I want is for her to somehow become a scapegoat of this, because there is something to be said that if people start blaming her to be a part of this deep state conspiracy like we were previously joking about, that's where things get very sad and very dramatic, and that's where I lose a little bit of love for the sport, like Nick has kind of alluded to.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's like the worst case scenario, right? Like, it's just the shitty thing about human beings is that whether we like it or not, Christian Horner will not suffer nearly as bad as whoever's on the other end of those messages. Because if that person's name is leaked, then all of the diehard, Christian Horner fans will go after that person because they feel like they know Christian Horner, where this other person just seems like a scapegoat or, some sort of evil empire behind the scenes, to your point of like the conspiracy theories that'll come from it, or that already have come from it, I guess.
Speaking of which, Todd, do you want to go into the Josh Verstappen of this all? Because I think he is the other very interesting thing that's kind of looming in and around this story. And half the things that are said about him and his decaying relationship with Christian Horner, I do find fascinating in the professional sense, because I would think that if this team principal took my kid to the next level, and you're already speaking about my kid in the same hushed tones as you are a Schumacher, a Hamilton, a Senna, or whomever, I would want to keep that band together, so to speak, as opposed to break up the band, unless he's trying for the ultimate power play and he wants to be the defining person in his son's life as the best race car driver of his era, which I don't think is going to happen, even in the wildest of circumstances.
Yeah, the Josh thing, I don't know if there's a ton to that, other than like there's, I don't know, the rumor mill is that like behind the leak was Josh Verstappen or someone in his camp, whatever. But it was not widely reported that Christian Horner and Josh Verstappen had like some sort of a blow up in the garage on Thursday or Friday night during right after one of the free practices. And then he was very vocal in the media saying, if Christian Horner remains in charge of this team, it's going to like blow it up or tear it down or whatever the words were. So it feels very much like he's trying to, for whatever reason, be that number one figure in Max's life, when you're right, like Horner took Max on and built him up, and like Max had the talent, whatever, but he put him in the right situation to win, and he's literally about to have probably the best season ever in Formula One.
Yeah, it seems insane. I mean, on one hand, I guess, like, I don't have kids, so I don't know how this would work, but I do understand, if this is a new thing for Joss and Christian Horner, and it's all about this, drama, then yes, probably has at least some right to be upset about it, right? You're risking a lot by letting something like this happen and get in the way of the success that you clearly have had over the last handful of years. I do think, just based on all of the stories of Max being left behind as a child, so he had to run to catch the car and all these, or walk back home or ride his bike back home or whatever, get rides from other people at the racetrack because Joss was just a dick to him. It would be a great Netflix series for 10 or 15 years from now if Joss really drives Max and Christian Horner apart, and that ultimately becomes the thing that stops Max from becoming the greatest driver of all time, statistically speaking.
But even then, Nick, I feel like it's a little out of order, because what we're used to, especially from an American sports fan perspective, is we're not, oblivious to the very demanding father or the driver or the pro that never was, right? Like Press Maravich, insert your favorite sports dad here. But this almost seems out of order, because usually the first act is dominated by the overly complicated, overly competitive father ruining their kid, possibly taking away their love for marriage, love of the sport, marriage to the sport, if you will. And then they find a second dad, a charismatic person that shows them, hey, this is why I fell in love with the sport. And now it's almost out of order, because I think, to my knowledge, Max Verstappen and Christian Horner go more hand in hand than any other driver and principal I can think of outside of Lewis and Toto, and that was kind of old hat by the time I got into the sport. So this is really interesting, because maybe he's now realizing, hey, I should probably cash in on my son. But to your point, Nick, if this is what their family history and their family dynamic has been about, is Joss being an asshole, and somehow that fosters the crucible that Max was born into and out of, and that's what led him to be this godless killing machine of a driver, then yeah, okay, maybe Josh does get some sort of credit for it, but it's still Horner. Horner was the one that soothed the beast, that got him to be a little bit more marketable, got him to be a little bit more situationally aware.
I mean, I've read some stuff, but like I can't remember specifics. I know there are definitely examples of him being, super hard on him, but I'm not saying that to talk down on him. I think that's the case with any
tough love
world champion driver, right? Like, especially in racing, like these kids, like, I mean, my first job was umpiring little league games, and like parents are fucking lunatics. Like, almost made me not want to have kids, because it's like I'm literally out there like watching these kids run backwards around the bases, and parents are trying to argue with me over balls and strikes, and like, just let the kids have fun. And eventually, when they get to be 8 or 9 years old, they can actually think about what sports means. But I also think that, like, in my head, the way that Jos Verstappen exists, other than like obviously racist slurs spewing from his mouth, it basically is like the dad from Talladega Nights. Can't sit with the family at Applebee's, has to like just go run away from it all. That seems to be like the picture that I have in my mind, and it might not be fair.
Don't you put that evil on me? Don't you put that
Exactly,
evil that
yeah.
Max Verstappen is likable to me.
But I think you nailed it though, right? Like, Max has gotten better with Christian Horner. Like, that has to be a part of the reason for the success, right? Like, you don't find that level of trust very often, to your point. Like, it, I would even, I can't think of anybody beyond Toto and Lewis long term that have that type of relationship.
The only one I could think of, and then I'll let Todd speak, because I think you and I have been hogging the mic from Todd. and I go with the rare cross sport comparison, right? Who was Mike Tyson's first trainer? Was it Del Bate? Apologies, boxing fans, if I get the name wrong, but he was this elderly Italian man, and he was the one, similarly, that sued that beast that got Mike to overachieve, which is saying something because Mike was raw phenom of a prospect. But you do need some sort of sweet science to be whispered in someone's ear to allow them to get to that next level. And that's what I will remember Horner for before this god-awful rendition of American Pie. Sorry, Don McLean, if you're not rolling in your grave, you will be after watching this video for the umpteenth time. But that's what's going to happen because let's say this. Let's go down the biggest rabbit hole. Let's say something happens in the next 3 weeks and Horner's no longer there. And then lo and behold, who's there to be the principal of Red Bull Racing? It's Josh Verstappen. There is no way that he would operate. No, there's no chance in this hypothetical, but indulge me. There's no way that Max is going to drive at that same level because there's going to be some sort of resentment that will eventually pop up because it's his dad. It's that man who shaped his legacy by leaving him at a gas station, even though he won that go-kart race. I had to look that up while Nick was talking. So that's something he did to his kid when the kid won the race. So I get your tough love, but he won the race.
Yeah. So is that even possible? Like, is it possible that Christian Horner and Red Bull part ways?
It could be, depending on, like, now there's Ford's talking about they're looking into their contract with Red Bull to see if they can dissolve it before the thing has even gotten going. And I know it's just a branding deal for their engines, but there's a lot of money being thrown around. So it's pretty crazy for them to even say that, but they are publicly saying they're looking into the contract situation.
That's crazy.
Because they just don't want to be involved in the situation regardless of what it is, right? If it is, love triangle and Horn Dog's corner, or if it is like a hit job from Josh Verstappen or whoever the hell, they're just saying we're not really feeling the vibes over there. But it's very possible that because of public pressure, I doubt it would ever happen in Formula One for them to do the right thing kind of thing, because money rules the world there. If it was this big scandalous thing with Christian Horner and he was being, inappropriate with a coworker, in unwanted advances, whatever the situation is, right? I still doubt Red Bull would do the thing, but there's a first time for everything for Formula One. And maybe there is a power play there between Red Bull proper and Red Bull Racing. Supposedly the majority shareholder of Red Bull Racing, or Red Bull, I don't know who it is. I can't remember his name, but he's got Christian Horner's back all day. So unless there's some behind the scenes workings there, I don't see Christian Horner leaving. Sounds like he's got a, shitstorm coming with the wifey, but other than that, I don't see him leaving.
Well, I'm glad he married Ginger Spice and not Scary Spice.
Speaking of Spice Girls, have you guys watched the David Beckham documentary recently?
Yeah. Yes. It's
pretty solid. But I would also throw Posh Spice into the glad he didn't marry category when it comes to this drama stuff, because there's some fun stuff in that show.
Oh no, I need to watch it.
Sporty Spice was the best. So I don't know why she's not in the conversation right now. It hurts a little, but she was my favorite. What the fuck was I gonna? No, I'm just thinking about Spice Girls.
It's okay. I'll tell you what you really, really want, Todd, and that's to find a way to segue into a new topic. Or do you still want to talk about the fact that you had mentioned that the new CEO, because I believe, was the gentleman's name Minshevitz, or the gentleman that passed last year? And there's a lot of talk that with his passing, would this create some sort of
power vacuum in the
yeah.
No, I don't think so. Mattershitz. I want to say his name. Yeah. Something like that.
That's like the founder of Red Bull.
Red Bull,
right?
Yep.
Yeah. Dietrich Mattershitz. Yeah. There it is, coming back to me slowly. There could be something like that going on. It hasn't been any leaks or rumors or anything that I've heard about from that side. Sounds like the CEO guy that has the 51% controlling share still has Christian Horner's back, and I think as long as that happens, then we're good. But like, there's all that talk about Dr. Evil now saying like, if Max wanted to go, because now Max is like the number one pick for Mercedes to pick, to replace Lewis with.
Why would he go to the third fastest car? Arguably, that's the other thing I don't understand.
I don't know.
I mean, if there's anything that I've learned from watching Formula One, go ahead.
You know, I was saying like if things fell apart at Red Bull and became like too toxic, even for the toxic Avenger, Jos Verstappen, then like I could see him pushing his son to go to Mercedes because they have the reputation, they have the past, and then he could be like, "Oh, I took the shit team that Lewis left and I made it a winning team again."
That's always the optics. But what were you saying, Nick?
I think if there's anything that I've learned from watching Formula One for 20, 30 something years, the grass is always greener. And there's no exception to that. If one little thing, look, these guys are incredibly talented race car drivers. They're incredible athletes. They put their bodies through things that like none of us would even survive. But they're also just drama queens, every single one of them. No matter how nice of a guy they are on camera or for the press or whatever, they are all just drama queens. Like the littlest look in the paddock is like notated and like, oh, that guy that you know, I didn't even know his name because there's 60 people wearing a uniform in the paddock at every race, but he's like the guy that, cleans, like he's like a parts cleaner, so he doesn't actually travel with the team. He just shows up like at the end of the weekend. That guy looked at a driver slightly weird or slightly too long, and that driver's like, I'm out. I'm going to, whatever the next trendy kick racing Braun GP, like whoever pops in with some money to start a new team, that's enough to send a driver to another team, in my opinion.
The mental image I have,
they're all dumb. They're all dumb.
Yeah,
in my
the
opinion.
mental image I have is 20 dudes all having notebooks with pens ready to make a list of people they hate, and they're all staring at each other in a circle, just waiting
Yeah.
for somebody to blink.
Yeah. And all
it's
it is
like that.
It's like the 20 names, right? They'll all have each other on the list, and then as soon as one of them does something slightly more, it's not this person sucks, it's just that they've moved a little bit higher than that other guy for the weekend, which then that's the weekend they go back to when it's like time to negotiate a contract. And it's like, oh, I mean, how many times have we seen people leave a team and then go back to the team? Like,
hi, Fernando.
I mean, but all of them do it. It's
Jenny Rick.
Jenny Rick.
Yep.
Like, I feel like they all do it at some point or another. And even that, like behind the scenes, the guys that are running the teams just move around and bounce around. It's like to put it in like, normal human beings experience terminology. It's like they all work in the same mall and they all work as retail employees. So no matter what, you're working in the same mall, and it's going to be the same bosses, the same terrible customers, the same terrible hours, and the same terrible experience. But there might be somebody hotter in that store across the way that makes you give up your job at GameStop and go work at Jamba Juice.
Can we do an episode where we put the hypothetical principles and which mall store they would be the manager at?
Gunther Steiner's Hot Topic.
Oh, no. I thought that would be Zach Brown and his grubby hands.
Just branding deals everywhere?
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that too. Yeah, I think we beat that horse to death.
That's what we do.
I guess we'll see. Who knows? There's another race this week by Sunday or Saturday. Sorry, Ramadan made it on Saturday. We could have a new team principal or somebody else leaking something else. Who knows? What else happened over the weekend?
I've got a couple things. Todd, do you want to talk about the capitulation of Alpine? Because I never thought a French team would ever surrender the way that they've surrendered, because the French historically are not those type of people. And they're certainly not a bunch of cheese-eating surrender monkeys, as I believe Grandpa Simpson once called them on The Simpsons.
So
Was
did
it-
Jeremy Clarkson on Top Gear.
Fair enough.
Cheese eating surrender monkeys. So Alpine / Renault apparently had their technical director and their head of aero development quit before the first race weekend. And then they just decided to not tell the staff that happened. Like, most of the staff didn't know until after the weekend, and they had like a team meeting and they announced everything. And I watched the races video on this, but like it's becoming cyclical now. They had like a big, a big reshuffling, some success, stagnation, dip, big reshuffling, it's like 3 times in a row now since they've been back in Formula One. I had to look it up because we were talking about this in the pre-show. I had to look up how many times Renault has left Formula One, and it's twice so far. And so far I put an emphasis because you think, for whatever reason, that they're on their way out. You, the American Pie, think that they're on their way out. So I want to hear why this is going to become Andretti.
It's going to be Andretti because of the fact that Andretti wants to be in the sport, and like you mentioned, Renault has a history of leaving the sport for whatever reason. And I think also the fact that who has benefited the most, actually they haven't even benefited from it, because the new ownership really hasn't taken stock of anything other than they're at the paddock, and that is Alpine, right? Because now their stable of investors includes Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Ryan Reynolds, Trent Alexander-Arnold, and a couple of other people as well. So to me, it only makes sense that you've got this new ownership that's still there, fresh to the sport. They don't want to necessarily lose their new meal ticket. I think Renault or Enstone uses this as an opportunity to get out, and I'm sure Ryan Reynolds can bat an eye or two at Andretti and say, we can figure something out, and lo and behold, this is how Andretti gets in. And not only that, I think they probably get in a slightly cheaper rate than they would have had they tried to go the expansion route.
I mean, I think that's a crazy hot take, but
I'm a cool dude. Hot takes with
You
cool
are a
dudes
cool
coming
dude.
soon.
you are a cool dude. And I also think that maybe this is just like, I don't know, some unexplainable American pride that I have, which has been a rare reason. I can't even remember the last time I actually felt that. But what if Ford and Red Bull and Andretti somehow
Combined forces?
combine forces? Not to reference a Spice Girls track again, but two become one type of thing, like, I don't know.
But why? What do you mean by that? Why would Red Bull, being the pinnacle of the sport right now?
I'm saying if Red Bull and Ford part ways.
Do you see Ford going with Renault?
Ford going with Andretti as like an American team with an American engine supplier.
But then, Nick, are you still saying that we'll have 11 teams on the grid, or would they replace somebody?
No, I'm saying if your hot take is correct and they take over the Alpine team, do they?
I think it's
does
a clear
Renault does like Alpine as a manufacturer want out of Formula One?
It seems.
It doesn't seem that way to me, but
Okay.
but you're bringing up that point, and that's kind of where my mind goes with it. Is like, well, if they did, then what if Ford and Andretti are somehow going to slide in with all of those celebrity investors that they do have?
So let me ask you this: has there been a scenario in Formula One past where a team leaves, but their carcass is left on the grid, and new ownership essentially picks at it and says, "Okay, these are the parts we want to keep. Everything else we'll bring in brand new." Because that's how I would imagine the scenario you just called out, which is they may keep Alpine in name or spot on the grid alone, but then everything else gets overhauled.
Yeah.
Maybe the first thing that comes to mind is Braun.
BMW,
Yeah, that
BMW
kind of fell apart, right?
and then Lotus, Renault,
Yeah.
Marussia. Like, there's a whole list. Even in the last decade, we could probably name.
So there's a precedence. That's the first thing
Yeah.
I want to establish.
But there's one thing that you guys are both forgetting here. Andretti's partnered with who to become part of Formula One?
Audi, right?
Cadillac.
Oh, Cadillac, yeah.
Which is General Motors. Which is even more so why the Alpine deal could make sense, because Alpine or Renault / Nissan has some sort of, they already have some other deals in place for customer motorsport stuff. Like, I don't understand exactly what it is, but I have read about that somewhere before, that there is some GM ties to Renault for the French market or something like that. So the Alpine / Cadillac / Andretti thing makes a little bit more sense. The Ford thing doesn't. Not that crap on that, but like, I would see Ford going back to the VW group and saying like, hey, let's get the Ford Porsche team or something like that.
Yeah, I totally forgot about the Cadillac thing. But
So
you're right. That would definitely be an uphill battle for Ford to get involved with Andretti. But I also wonder what those contracts even look like, right? Like, those contracts are there's probably nothing actually happening at the moment. It's like, hey, we've signed, intent to work together if and when, there's an approval on the other side for Andretti. But yeah, you're definitely right though. Like, that would be like a massive shift to happen.
That would be crazy. But we don't, like,
hey,
something changes every 3 days, so
it's crazy. But I've seen, and people who watch sports car racing can think about, like, Audi and Porsche had their names together on a race car 40 years ago or whatever it was.
That's true.
And you would have never thought that back then. Now those kind of things can happen, and you can have, like, Infiniti and Jaguar and Honda and every team name on the planet, every brand name on the planet on a Formula One car. But yeah, that's a pretty wild thought.
Yeah. Cactus Jack, whatnot, McDonald's Formula One team. So throughout this whole situation, though, I feel bad for Pierre. Weirdly, like, Ocon was already in this mess, and like Ratatouille, I feel like, kind of, this sounds weird to say, but it's kind of deserving of that, like, middling seat. I've never liked the guy. Don't give me the shock face, bro. We know how I feel about Ratatouille.
How dare you? It's a tremendous dish. It's a tremendous movie, and he's a tremendous driver. But go on.
He has overachieved at best. I would put him on par with Lance Stroll.
Oh, how dare you?
Seriously. Slightly above Lance Stroll.
Thank you.
Don't get too excited.
All right, continue your monologue, you jackass.
Iron Trev. But like, in this whole thing, like, Pierre had the promise, showed a lot of promise, I guess, kind of crumbled under the pressure at Red Bull.
But who hasn't?
But there's been a long list. But like, I feel like he has the talent to be above the seat that he's in now, and they're now probably for the foreseeable future, unless they pull a McLaren of last year, like, they're probably going to end up dead last in the championship. The car's too heavy, it's too slow. Based on the, like, construction of the chassis and stuff like that, they know where they need to take weight out, but it's not going to be a quick fix. And their engine's like 15 horsepower, supposedly underperforming compared to the rest of the grid.
Do we want to make a juice box bet? I'll make my first juice box bet.
Sure, let's get into it.
Alpine will finish 9th or higher in the constructors.
Ooh.
Because you just gave me the laundry list of why they're going to be the worst car, and there's a Haas-sized hole in your argument. There may be a Williams-sized hole in your argument.
No, Williams is 7th, maybe 6th.
Okay.
If you said 8.5, I would take that bet. So if they finish,
don't. I said what I said. 9th or higher.
All right, juice box bet it is.
Juice box bet it is, ladies.
They're dead last.
They're going to be dead last. No, that's fair because ultimately they didn't qualify well. They didn't have a good race at all. I'm worried. And not only that, let me ask you this question because it almost seems that Pierre Gasly kind of followed the Danny Rick trajectory in terms of leaving Red Bull because he went straight to Renault or Alpine as we know it, thinking he made a difference. And yeah, he may have gotten a couple podiums last year, but this looks like, to your point, Todd, 2 steps back. I guess my question to the both of you is this the reason why we might see not one, but both French drivers out of Formula One if this Alpine truly shits the bed like you say it will?
Yeah, I personally don't think Alpine's leaving. I think that was...
No, I meant like the fact that both Ocon and Gasly have hitched their wagon to Alpine, and because they're going to be as bad as they are, do you see either one of them rebounding or either one of them gaining a market after this year? Because I believe both of them are out of contract.
The only people that aren't out of contract are like the McLaren drivers, Leclerc, and Max, I think.
So do either one of them come across as desirable free agents to you? Or are they both to a point of no salvation and no like salvageability of it all?
Obviously, I think Pierre is, but like a good prospect for him would be going to like AlphaTauri or V-Carb.
V-Carb?
Whatever. Arby's, we have the meats. But he's not going to go back there. He's not going to go back to the Red Bull camp. So I don't see his stock being high enough to get into something like... I think Aston's set, even though they're both out of contract.
Could the winner of this Alpine duel be the second seat for the Audi team? Could you see that scenario?
Oh, that's a good point.
I make those every now and then.
I honestly... I like that idea, but I feel like they're gonna go
Albon,
Bavarian, maybe Albon. I think they'll go Bavarian. Like I kind of think like Mick Schumacher might have a shot.
Oh
at a
my
seat
ass! If don't ever compare SD Bestie.
No, I was actually saying more. I think Ocon is gonna ride it till it's in flames.
The baguette
right?
falls off.
Yes. Yes. I could see Pierre actually trying to make a move to greener pastures. I think Ocon views himself as the team leader there, even though they kind of are both betas. I feel like because he's been there a year, whatever longer, maybe 2 years longer. I feel like
because wasn't he tail end of Danny Rick and then both years of Fernando?
You're right. So it has been 3.
He has to be, but anyway.
I think both of them are kind of in that like, well, this is the last chance for the home team kind of chance, let's give it a shot. But I actually disagree with Todd because I think like Ocon hasn't had a good car at all. He's never driven a good car. So with Pierre, he's had a better car with the AlphaTauri, right? Like I think we would agree that the AlphaTauri was
even
a better
the Red
car.
Bull, right? I mean,
and the Red Bull, obviously, yeah. But like somebody probably would give Ocon a chance in a seat that we would consider higher up on the grid, is what I'm getting at.
And then not only that, I believe Ocon was the reserve driver for Mercedes, so things are really dire. They could reach out to Essie Bessie because if I remember my managerial carousel of Formula One, isn't he also managed by Toto Wolff?
He is. But do you think the Pumpernickel Smuggler is...
I don't even know who that is, but keep going.
That's Toto Wolff.
Oh, okay.
He... I have to give credit for that. What's that guy's name? The British kid with the mohawk. Oh, rocket powered mohawk. He's insane. He's very inappropriate, sometimes not very PC, but he has probably the funniest nicknames about F1. And the Pumpernickel Smuggler is Toto Wolff because he wears Speedos on the beach.
Please say that slowly. I don't want you to mess that one up.
Yeah. What the fuck was my point?
Your point was, I mentioned the fact that Ocon is
Toto Wolff's not that dumb. He's not going to get Ocon. He has a laundry list of drivers to choose from. He's not going to get Ocon to replace Lewis
What are
Hamilton.
Toto's top 5 drivers then?
Yeah,
Todd?
give me the Rolodex. The 16-year-old Filippelli, Karen Filippelli.
He had a shit race this weekend, or he just had a shit weekend in general. He qualified, I think, second to last. Young Kimmy, and Andrea Kimmy Stillarelli, whatever his name is. I think he would be probably 2 on the list. I think Max is 1. If there's even a hint of Max being available, I think Max is obviously 1.
That goes without saying. If Max is available, there should be 15 teams trying to get him on the grid.
Yeah, but I think the only one that like weirdly makes sense in this like weird spiteful fever dream, as you called it earlier, like Max going to Mercedes would be like the biggest, if he does have this falling out with Christian, right? The biggest FU to Red Bull and Christian Horner is like, oh, I'm gonna go to your hated rival.
I'll do you one better. He takes Charles' spot in Ferrari. That would be the ultimate FU.
He just like, hey, let's crush this kid's dreams even more. He's in contract. I'm going to take your spot, Mr. Steal Your Girl.
I mean, the Mercedes thing would also be like a thing that Max would do, though, just to prove that he could win in Lewis's seat, right? Like, I feel like that's like, I mean, if he could pull that off in some, fever dream world, like it's hard to argue that he is not the greatest driver of all time if he were to somehow pull that off.
I mean, but going back to the original prompt, which was the WWF one of it all, if there's a scenario where there's a Brutus and Barber Beefcake barbershop edition where Ocon and Gasly are the Marty Jannetty and Shawn Michaels, best believe Pierre Gasly is going through the barbershop window because Esteban Ocon super kicked him. That's for like 3 fans, but the real ones know.
Check out my friend's wrestling podcast. No, I can't believe in any shape, way, or form that Esteban Ocon's stock is higher in the driver market. Yeah,
that's fair.
I think they both have valleys, right? I think Ocon's valleys are a little lower, and I think Pierre's peaks are a little higher.
Yeah, I think the opposite. I think Gasly's a little bit more consistent, but Ocon's ceiling is a lot higher.
Has Ocon won a race?
Yes.
Won because of who?
That's fine. You didn't tell me there was an asterisk that qualified the race. He's won a race.
Pierre Gasly has also won 1 race because of kind of himself. Granted, there was events that happened that put him there, but
did he create those events?
But he didn't have Fernando playing ultimate defense behind him. That's all I'm saying.
I can't help if Fernando wanted to do his job that day.
Okay. I
agree to disagree.
Yeah, we're gonna have to. Because neither of them are going to get a Mercedes seat, let's be honest.
No, they probably won't.
Yeah. But speaking of disagreements, let's talk about MBS in Las Vegas.
Let's do it. The Hangover?
Yeah.
Okay, so further news. This never sleeping giant of Formula One is after the Christian Horner leak. It was very short, like I think it was the next day, maybe the same day. I don't even remember. It's all a blur. It was reported that Mohammed bin Sulayem is under investigation from the FIA, of which he is the president, for trying to either get a penalty waived or get a penalty put on Fernando Alonso. I can't remember.
It was waived. He was trying to get rid of the penalty that Alonso was charged with doing, because if I remember correctly, the incident was they had put him on tire jacks to serve the penalty, but then somebody decreed he still didn't serve the penalty properly, and MBS's whole point was, yes, he did. Let's waive this penalty and keep racing.
Gotcha. Okay, so there was that, right?
Yep.
And then almost immediately after, it was said that he's also under investigation by the FIA for trying to get the Las Vegas GP circuit not certified, which is, if you're unaware, one of the first basically Formula One owned racing events. So they put a large majority of the money up. So did the Nevada taxpayers. But they have a very heavily invested stake in the Las Vegas race. And he supposedly was trying to put pressure on the FIA circuit, whatever the scrutineers, I guess. I don't know what to call them. To not approve the circuit for racing, because it has to be approved for a certain level of racing, and he was trying to get that to not happen. This is the president of the governing body of Formula One, not involved with Formula One, but their largest cash cow for the FIA. They get basically most of their money from Formula One racing. Why? I don't understand this play here from his side.
He's going for that Rocket League track that Trevor sent to the group text earlier today. The 20 story.
Yep.
Yeah.
20-story tall. Just ultimately, initially when I heard this, I thought, oh, this is them trying to deflect from the Christian Horner thing. But there's more layers to this, much like the Horner story, where I genuinely don't know what's going on in this sport. And I'd always kind of heard that, hey, this sport's a little different in terms of how it governs itself and how there isn't any sort of consistency other than the inconsistency. But my goodness, like, he truly is he trying to be Vince McMahon? Like, are we really going full WWF? Because I can't think of anything else, because why would he even want to enable himself to get involved in all of this? Because if he's supposed to be the head of the governing body, there to be seen and not or heard in a sense, but like, does he have some sort of prior relationship with Fernando Alonso that he was doing him a solid? Like, do you guys know any of that aspect of it?
I don't know of any prior relationship. I don't know, honestly, what MBS did prior to being the president of the FIA.
Let's not look into such matters, because people have died.
Yeah, I'm sure. But I don't understand what his, like, he, from the, not to bring it up again, but from the Abu Dhabi 21 thing, he steps in, promises clarity, promises like a calming, reasoned voice for Formula One, and he's done nothing but. He interfered on the Andretti thing, saying that they're like approved and Formula One should approve them. To which F1 almost sued him over, I think. There's been just a laundry list of him not being quiet, and he has very much a feeling of like he also is power hungry in the same like Jos Verstappen kind of way. But what do you guys think? Like,
generally speaking, do you think he, like, in the examples that are running through your head right now, Todd, do you think his intentions are good with those things that he's, stood against, whether it be Andretti or, this thing with Alonso or Vegas or whatever?
but why not? Like, I don't understand the Vegas thing at all. What does he have to gain by not approving the Vegas race, other than maybe holding power over F1, right?
Yeah, like there's got to be something there, that on a very high level, you don't want, if you're the FIA, you don't want Formula One owning any more than the minimum, right? To kind of keep that power play in place. That's my assumption, at least.
Yeah,
well, go ahead. Another race grows Formula One, grows their, purse, essentially, and that means they pay more money to the FIA.
It grows the influence, but then I think to the point that maybe Nick is making, where is that race in the United States?
Yeah.
And right now, maybe that's the big bugaboo in all this. MBS sees the writing on the wall. He knows that there's an expansion and a dedicated one specifically in North America, because outside of North America having 3 races, I can't think of a single country having more than one, except for maybe Italy. Like, so is he trying to grab them by the lug nuts, so to speak, and say, I'm not going to allow you to grow in the one spot that you want to grow in because you want to cash in on this popularity? And this is ultimately a bargaining play because maybe we don't see what the bigger picture is yet. And as for the Andretti thing, that almost counteracts the point I'm making, so maybe I should stop talking. But if he is trying to expand his sport and he gives permission to a very American team coming into the thing, it doesn't make sense to take away power unless he's just trying to show them that, hey, I'm not to be trifled with.
Yeah, it's contradictory, right? If he's fighting for an American team, but he doesn't want an American race there. Yep. I hadn't even thought about the aspect of that race that was, or that track that was, teased today. Is it Qiddiya? I don't know how to say that.
Let's go with that.
Saudi Arabia, another track in Saudi Arabia. That track looks amazing. Like, if that replaced the Las Vegas Grand Prix, I'd be like all for it, because somebody's going to take a header off of that turn 1 20-story building and
fall into a foam pit.
Maybe. Like, what? How is that safe? Anyway, maybe that's a good aspect. He does have ties to a lot of the oil money over there, so it would make sense for him to try to, like, hey, let's not get this race approved. 2 years from now, let's put this race in play.
But, I mean, the other thing... Go ahead, Nick.
I was just going to say, so contrary to my better judgment, please don't send anyone after us. I did look up his Wikipedia and just to see, like, where he was before. Like, he to be fair, he's educated in the U.S. and in Ireland and was a rally driver for 20 years with Ford and Toyota and won 14 Middle East rally championships. So, like, I think our natural pushback towards him is that he's connected to that oil money, and that's a negative thing. Maybe there is some, like, at his core, he's a racer type of conversation that we could potentially have if we knew a little bit more about him. That would also, maybe shift that, because to your point, Todd, like, seeing that other track, I have no idea how that would become a thing, because it literally does look like Rocket League or one of those, like, early 90s video games where you never
F-Zero.
die. F-Zero, yeah, that's the one I was thinking of. But, like, seeing that and thinking, like, obviously the money that comes into Formula One, if we are limited to how many races we're going to run in a year, and Saudi Arabia is developing that whole area over the next, 3 to 5 years or 12 months based on how fast they usually build cities, like, that could shape Formula One for decades, and if we're being completely honest, like, just like you said, Vegas is, like, I thought the race was great, but we're all skeptical of Vegas. Vegas is, like, I don't know, maybe I'm old by saying this, but Vegas is nothing like what I think a lot of people look at it as. And I think Formula One plays on a higher level than Vegas in a lot of ways. I don't know if that's good or bad, but that's kind of the way I think, like, there's a counterpoint to our conversation here that we don't really have a true understanding of.
No, and I don't think we'll ever get that understanding. And I think, to your point, Nick, we have to be very careful with how we deal with any sort of declarations we make around MBS, because the natural thought when it comes to somebody of that descent is, oh, they have to be connected to oil money, like you mentioned. And then with the oil money claims, there's always that claim of, oh, they're sports washing. They're trying to use the power of sport to clear something that may not be as airtight or morally sane. We're not going to get down that rabbit hole because, frankly, we don't have the information, and it would be very disingenuous on our part. But I do think this, like, if what we have kind of known about Vegas is it seems very cash grabby in a city that's built on a cash grab, quick and dirty. But I will say this, was the fact that this was Vegas's first year the reason why the race was good, because the drivers didn't know any better, and it's kind of something to see them figure these challenges out in real time. And when we're having this race review in, I believe, October for Vegas version 2, maybe the race becomes boring. Maybe it becomes Monaco 2.0 like I think we initially predicted, because now they've got a handle on it. And that being said, I hope that that track comes to fruition. I hope it comes through the most legal of means, and it's not compromising any sort of integrity, whether it be in an infrastructural thing like an FIA or something else altogether.
Yeah, I mean, just going a little bit further. I mean, he's been in the business of racing since the mid to early to mid 2000s. So like obviously he does come with some experience, which is really interesting. But to your point, Vegas to me, like I think the racing could be good going forward. I think like we're still in this Max is dominating era. So like when I say that, that means like middle of the pack or upper middle of the pack racing is good. But who knows? We loosen up enough manhole covers, it'll make everything interesting. So
That's
the name of my OnlyFans. So way to beat me for it.
wow. I don't want to know why. the I think the spectacle around Vegas, like it was fun to hate for me last year, and yeah, the racing was good. Yeah, I know, shocking, right? The race, but did he? You're not allowed to do that back to me. The race, I think, to Rohit's point, will get stale after a while. The teams will figure it out. It'll just become a big DRS train. I don't think it'll be Monaco level bad where there's no room to pass because it is going down like a 5-lane road or whatever on the strip. But it is just going to become a big DRS train eventually once the teams figure it out. Other than that, like the whole point of this episode, I guess, for me is that it's starting to feel like it's getting to a point where we're going to be talking about this crap more than the racing. And that's sad because even with Max's domination, I was excited for the season. And now I feel like it's just going to be like, oh, Max won again by 30 seconds. And, Otmar Safnauer carpet bombed the paddock this weekend for some reason. Like, right. Like it's going to be something ridiculous like that.
He went back into the Alpine paddock room and left a big upper decker and then just left without it.
Cleveland steamer in
easy
Ocon's helmet. Allegedly.
Please, he's more of a Flying Dutchman kind of guy. Let's end on that note.
Shout out In and Out.
What's the track? I'm drawing a blank right now. What's the track that was just built in the last few years that like is incredibly narrow?
Azerbaijan?
Is it
Jeddah? Is it this weekend? You're talking about Jeddah?
Was Jeddah like towards the end of the season prior?
No, Jeddah's been the second or third race since it came on the scene.
It's not Abu Dhabi. I'm trying to think.
Yeah, maybe it's Jeddah then.
It's the super fast, squiggly.
Yep. That track to me is more of a Monaco of the future, right? To your point about like the teams aren't going to risk. They're not going to go crazy in risking things when they know the results that are going to come from it. Like that's ultimately what happens at Monaco, right? Like drivers know there's 2 spots, maybe if you're lucky, in the perfect scenario that you could pass. And I think that's my hope is that Vegas is not that. Like I feel like it was wider than I anticipated. And it felt like a wider track than I anticipated. And I think with Jeddah, it seems like a very narrow track too. Like, I don't know. I'm kind of rambling, but I hope that Vegas actually like continues to be interesting, But I feel like, I don't know. Do you feel like that? What you kind of said is like once they figure it out, it just becomes a DRS train. Do you feel like that about every track?
No, not so much. I think there's still tracks that produce great racing. Like Silverstone is always good.
I like Monza.
Monza is. It has that whole nostalgic factor. So that like keeps the love for it there, like Monaco. But there are DRS trains that happen there. The one thing about that, it's got some of the longest straights of the season. So like they're hitting 230 or something on some of the straights, and it's like immediately into like a very hard braking zone. So it's produces racing in a different way there, I guess. Like people make mistakes. Not artificial. That's not the right. It's just a different. It's overtakes by mistakes, kind of. Where Silverstone is like genuine racecraft overtakes. Think of like 2022 Silverstone when Lewis kind of dive bombed Max in the corner and sent him into the wall at 170.
Good times.
Stuff like that. Like, I don't know. I don't feel like that about every track, but I feel like the more we get away from these historic actual racetracks and we're just building street circuit after street circuit, it's going to be more of that.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in this ground effect era, because it would probably be worse with the last generation of cars, granted. But if you don't have high speed corners and it's all like hard right, hard left, chicane, stuff like that, you're not going to get good racing.
Fair point. What are we wrapping on?
What are we wrapping on? Oh, I've got a new reoccurring segment. This Week in Yuki. What happened to our guy? He was angry.
Ooh, he was a hothead. Yeah, how did we forget that?
I was saving it. I was purposely saving it. I wanted to drop it on both of you in the moment because we need to end on something a little more pleasant. Then why not get as pleasant as possible when it comes to an angry sub 6 foot Japanese man who's just mad at the world, but most of all mad at himself.
Foot.
He's not sub 5'5".
He's like 5'2", right? 5'3". Man, so this might come as a shock, but like I kind of get him in this one. Like,
talk to me about it.
The team screwed it up, right? If they were going to let Daniel through, they should have done it earlier than they did. I feel like Daniel should have been on the radio way earlier, saying, "I've got the pace, I've got the new softs. Let me get a chance at this." And then they basically waited until Daniel's tires started to fall off, and then they're like, "Okay, swap positions." And Yuki was like basically on the bumper of what was it, the Haas car? Or no, it was Albon? No,
yep.
Haas car, right? It was a Haas.
I think it was Haas.
Fighting for like 12th or 13th, which at that point you're not even fighting for points. So like, I don't have a problem necessarily holding station there, but I also understand like, hey, like let Danny Rick go fight and see if he can get just to see how the car does, you know, kind of thing. Also to his defense a little bit, he didn't just do that on the cooldown lap to Danny Rick. He did it to like everybody. He was like so pissed that he was still going race pace while everybody's on a cooldown lap. And he was like dive bombing everyone into corners and locking up and super pissed. So like, I get it, but like, it's not helping his case, right? He's known for being like a hothead driver, kind of exploding on the radio. And he's out of contract at the end of this year. So he's either got to start getting points consistently or people aren't going to want to touch him.
Yeah.
I was just going to say this. Do you think he takes Esteban Ocon's spot on Mercedes or? Reason. Go ahead.
He's going to take Fernando Alonso. He's going to go third driver, Aston Martin, and then take Fernando Alonso when he inevitably jumps ship at 50 and take the Aston Martin spot because Honda, as of 26, will be with Aston Martin.
Speaking of angry messages, I know that we have a favorite author on this podcast, and that is one Anita Driver. If you guys haven't checked out their most recent book, let me just go ahead and read you the description if you can. Oh no, it's even better. It's called Zen and the Art of Formula One Racing, Meditative Poetry from the Zen Masters of the Paddock. And it's a really interesting premise because essentially what it does is the parallel between the intense focus of Formula One drivers racing at 300 kilometers per hour and the serene mindfulness of Zen. Featuring insightful quotes from famous Formula One personalities interwoven with evocative poems, this book opens a fresh perspective on navigating life's challenges with grace and poise. I.e., they use famous race car driver messages to the teams and work it into bouts of poetry. And I heard the first one, and my goodness, I'm trying to find the exact text so I can read it to you, but it does no justice. So I will be sending both of you a clip of it, and I would love to get your takes on it. And we need to try to figure out how to get Anita on the show.
Yes.
We have to. I don't understand how they, having read some of the Overtake My Heart book, maybe it's AI writing that or something, but it's so perfect.
Are you ready for book 2? I'm ready to buy it for you.
No, I haven't actually read the children's version of a Lance Stroll Guide to Fire Safety yet. I will be reading that to to my daughter.
Good job.
Oh man. I mean, to be honest, that's the most exciting thing about this season. So, it's the thing I'm looking forward to the most.
All right.
In
Any
the
shock
books.
projections for points or podiums or anything in Jeddah?
In the non-Max Verstappen getting podium perspective, I'm going to go with Sainz, Checo. Actually, I'll go the rare double Ferrari 1-2. I'll go Sainz, Leclerc, Checo.
I need like statistics, some analytical mind to tell me how long I can bet on one thing until it eventually becomes true, and if I run out of money and go broke betting on this. But I'm just going to say Lando needs to get his first win again.
Spoiler alert.
It's not going
That
to
might be
happen,
a hot
I don't think.
take.
But yeah, I mean, that's all I'm really hoping for at this point this season. Like, everything else is kind of going to be like meh. I feel like half the grid doesn't care. Half the grid knows that their contract is up, and they probably are going to get ousted for some, young kid that, is going to come in and, it's changing of the guard type of thing. If you've been in Formula One for 4 or 5 years, or in some cases 10, 12, you're kind of old news. People want to see new drivers out there. So
Unless your dad can buy a team.
of course, yeah.
Have
In
to
which
get my shots
case,
in.
we'd happily manage that team for you. So if
Yeah.
your dad's buying a Formula One team, just let us know. We're all looking for Formula
I'm
One
an ordained
careers.
minister, so I can marry you to the team. You
Nice.
let me know.
I will happily clean parts. I'm just putting it out there. I will be the guy that looks at drivers weird and cleans parts.
They're so lucky.
You have any predictions, Todd?
I could actually see Lando qualifying in the top 3. I don't know if the McLaren has race pace enough to hold it over the Ferraris yet, but
yeah,
it should suit the car. Their quality in high speed corners, which Jeddah is basically all high speed corners. So we'll see. I think, Max wins one of the Ferraris on there, and we'll say a McLaren in P3, probably Lando.
Fair enough.
All right. Where can people find you, and when will they get the hot takes episode?
Let's do the hot takes episode this weekend. The people are clamoring for it. Maybe it can be a nice bumper on the Sunday night after we discuss whatever the hell happens. That's hopefully not a Max win. But you can find me on Instagram at RoadM13. You can find me on X at Roheezy. I think we mentioned Malhotra Man cover at OnlyFans. So, Todd, where can they find you? Stop giggling, Todd.
Manhole cover opener or something.
Loose
You said something.
manhole covers, sir.
Okay. You can find me on Instagram, dadshoe_JPEG, or dadshoe.jpeg, on Twitter at dadshoe_JPEG. And you can find me beating up on old people on your local pickleball courts.
Nice. You
That's
can
all I
find me
got.
at Nick Engvall on all the platforms. More importantly, follow Exhaust Notes FM everywhere. And hit the first link in the description wherever you're watching, listening to this, to join the rest of the community in the Discord, talk about the races in between races and all that other fun stuff. Catch you on the next one. Appreciate y'all. Thank you. Peace.
It was me.